Hi, this is Ian Wright, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about working with emotion in children, young children. I'm not talking 2-year-old tantrums, because when kids are very young, they're incredibly good at expressing their emotions. It's direct. They feel something, they express it, and it's done. And they move on to the next thing. They don't tend to hold things. I'm talking more about as children engage, as they get older, 4, 5, 6, actually younger and younger, unfortunately, these days, they gain social awareness. And through the social context, they tend to start holding emotion in, not doing that tantrum. And that tantrum is kind of hard for the parents or carers at the time, but it's clear, you know where they stand, and it's finished. I mean, there are some younger children who are kind of deep and hold things inside and let them bubble up. And they're harder, and I think the same thing of what we're going to talk about here would apply to those. But I'm talking about older children once social confinement, I would say, starts affecting their behaviour, and they don't necessarily feel free to express their emotion. But there are children, and a lot of the children who we work with, and in general, who are in situations where they're surrounded by big emotions. And, whether it's parental divorce or upset or actually grief, one of the biggest ones that obviously we see is a grandparent or even a great-grandparent when they're young dying. And what do they do with that emotion? It's a massive thing for a child to cope with the loss and grief, or the loss and grief of a parental relationship, or whatever it is, whatever upset it is. And I just wanted to, some people were asking me about how I would advise to do that. And I'm no expert, I'm no psychologist, but I've been working with children for 25 years, and I have 3 of my own, who are teenagers, late teenagers now. And I just wanted to kind of put down a couple of thoughts that may or may not be relevant. But I suppose the most important thing is, as a parent or a carer, and you're working with a child who is, say they're emotionally upset, you can feel it, you can see it in their behaviour. Their behaviour goes awry, they're switching off, they're cutting off. They may have outbursts, but it's not really about the issue. And they're being disruptive, or there's a change in their behavioural pattern, and you link it to a specific emotional story, say. Now, is there a certain way of working and dealing with a child who is in this situation? I suppose the first thing is, which is actually one of the hardest things as a parent these days, is to be able to give the child a little time. I think one of the hardest things for a child, because children process emotions in slightly different ways than adults, because especially in the younger years, they cannot conceptualize, they cannot emotionally process feelings. It's much harder. They tend to store them in their body, which is why when we're working as osteopaths, it's a great access point. You can release the tensions that kind of build up in children. So the first thing, I think, is time, to give them a bit of time, which doesn't mean you go in and you say, there's something wrong, we need to talk about this. That's actually, no, you don't. It's hard enough. I wouldn't even do that with a teenager. But with a young child, you actually get down on the floor and you hang out with them and you play with them, and if they say they're 5, 6, 7 years old, you do what they're doing. You hang out, you just sit next to them, you watch telly together. Encourage that kind of physical presence where you go to a place as the adult of kind of quiet, and receptiveness, where they can feel free to kind of breathe, something that's, say something's locked in them. If you're stable and quiet beside them, but present, there's a chance for them just to breathe it out a little bit and to open up to it. Any kind of reactivity and tension in the parent or carer will pull them further in, which is not what we want to do. As the parent, I think there are certain tricks we can invoke which can be helpful, and they are along a kind of mindfulness practice, which would be, the first point would be to kind of accept that your child is upset and holding it in as the parent. So you're producing a kind of sense of acceptance that the child is in this place. And that in itself, if you accept it and not react to it, even if you're being caring, we tend to react because we want to make them better. Just accept it. This is where they are. So that softens it immediately. And then just allow them to be exactly how they are in that moment, which is, it may be them not speaking a word, or it may be them just being whatever they're being. And just allow whatever is to come up, and then just quietly observe how they are, and not throw in an emotional reaction if they come up with something that's emotional, or that is literally to not react. The point is if you create this space where the child is comfortable and free to access their emotions, it's a safe space, which parents do naturally. I'm talking the obvious here, but sometimes we kind of need reminding of it. Because we, as parents, I know this a billion times over, we tend to react because we've always wanted to make my children better if they're not feeling right, and it's a nightmare. It's the wrong thing. It's a mess up. It tends to be, because I tend to overcompensate, etc., try too hard, get emotional myself, oh my gosh, So just sit there in a place of peace in yourself, or find a place of peace, and accept that they're in this space. Allow them to be exactly how they're going to be, and just observe them and be there. And if they say anything at all, or if anything comes up, don't prompt them. I don't think it's right to prompt children. I think let it come if it comes. If it comes, then you can ask a little bit of a question. But actually, if you dig in there, they tend to recoil, and that doesn't help at all. Just sit there in a space of acceptance, and that, I think, is often enough to allow them just to soften. They feel loved. Children release things that build up by sitting in a space where they're loved. And it's the easiest thing, isn't it, for a parent to do, for us to do with our children, is to completely love our children. And just sit there and wait. And actually, patience and timing and acceptance, I think, are the three kind of elements that we can sit with. And if something comes up, then we can go, okay. But the important thing is to go, okay, I understand that you're feeling that, and just accept that. Okay, that's okay that you're feeling that. And it's good that you're feeling that. Not even good, it's okay that you're feeling that. So, and if you want to say anything more, that's fine. Or if you don't, it's fine. We'll just sit with this, and it's okay. And that in itself is enough, I think, often with children. And if you keep producing this kind of softening, accepting stance, they'll feel safer and safer. And actually, sometimes they won't even know, but they'll start, expressing themselves and giving you what, is held in there. And that can be incredibly healing, actually, for both you and the child, just to sit there in this place of acceptance. Anyway, it's a little... It's just a little thought. I hope it helps. I know I'm kind of preaching the obvious almost. Anyway, I wish you well.